You're listening to The Crunch with Cam Slater, right here on RCR, Reality Check Radio.
Matt McCarten and I have both been political opponents and good friends for a very long time. We both understand you need back channels to bypass the public side of politics, and it is in those back channels where brutal honesty is required from both sides in order to get consensus. He's on the line to discuss the results of the election with me now. Welcome to The Crunch, Matt McCarten.
Good afternoon to you, Robert.
It's a bit of a bath for the left on Saturday night.
A bit of a bath.
Yeah, a bit of a bath. Probably a bucket of cold water as well.
Yeah, I think the word I was searching for on election night was bloodbath. You know, a Saturday massacre. You know, the red wedding. You know, or funeral. So no, it was in one sense it was what happens in elections, everyone gets hopeful, you know, and they don't look at the numbers anymore. So I went into a bit of a sweepstake, and I'm disappointed to say that I was eerily accurate, because people like you and I, we don't get emotional when we're looking at polls, because I'm someone who believes polls.
Yeah, always believe the polls.
Yeah, that's what I always think, you know, and then because, you know, it's not emotional. Okay, you know. And what do people do? They compare polls with other polls. But as you know, you compare polls with the previous poll from the same pollster. That's the key.
Yeah.
What's the trend? So that was pretty good. So it was this is the Labour Party, which was, didn't have an election for a year ago. We had a coronation, you know.
Yes. Yeah.
And it was a big thank you to Jacinda for saving the country. And of course, it didn't help that the National Party was still as rhythm. So, you know, but this election wasn't so much, in my view, is that National didn't win it, Labour lost it.
No, that's always the way, though. Incumbents always lose.
As you know. But I think incredibly, this is, how do you lose half of your caucus? You know, and, you've got to be, almost half of the caucus, but I'll say half, go from 50% record to kind of 28% as we speak. So that's an extraordinary loss, and I'm not sure that they even understand why they lost, you know. And of course it didn't all go to National. I mean, National got its provincial vote back, as you know. So they got provincial. Well, it wasn't a Labour's vote anyway, right? It's just not loads, and so that was always going to go back. But what happened is National didn't pick up, the votes that went from Labour, the Labour's votes.
No, they went everywhere.
I know.
Talking to David Farrer, he was saying they were going everywhere. It was literally anyone but Labour election.
Exactly. So that's what happened there, right? So National, they were the recipients of Labour's demise, but they don't come with a strong mandate. But, I was watching Chris Hipkins when he's doing his concessory speech, and I thought, has someone told him that he lost the election? And it's kind of, whereas as you know, and everyone who's listening, say, you get up and say, I want to thank, I want to congratulate Christopher Luxon, the new Prime Minister. I want to say, I want to thank, acknowledge Winston Peters' huge victory tonight. Who would have thought, kind words, the Greens won 3 seats. That's a huge thing for them. The Māori Party, that's a monumental change, and these are permanent changes. And I want to acknowledge, and then I want to acknowledge the people of New Zealand and my party. And then, as Mike Moore says, the people are always right. And it just needed to be that kind of reflection, just saying, we've got a message. We've got the message. We will have to now, understand what that message was, and we're going to have, blah, blah, but there was all that, we've done this and we've done that, and we've said, what? So that...
he was sitting there talking about how they've built 13,000 houses, and I was sitting there thinking to myself, hang on a minute, you promised us 100,000. That's a little bit short.
I wasn't going to be mean, but yes, exactly right. And of course, when you raise that 13,000 homes, and you think, so after 6 years, since 8 years ago when you made that policy,
Yep.
You've got that. If that was in the business world, you would have sacked your CEO, right?
Well, we did, didn't we?
Well, indeed. Sorry, you've got him. Yes, you did.
Yeah. I mean, we did sack him, but I thought too that Christopher Luxon was rather presumptuous in his victory speech.
Yes, he was. Because you and I know in politics, you've got to learn to count.
Yeah.
And what they were doing is they were at primary school counting, not where they need to be. And special votes are 20%. They've always leaned towards the left as a thing, and then Māori particularly because of the strung out nature with rental accommodation. People move around a lot. They move from electorate to electorate, et cetera, right? Always a big. Last election, those votes went to Māori and brought that extra seat through. The Greens always do well because they're young people sort of moving around, the students. And National doesn't do so well, and that's partly because its voter base is stable. So there's not so many special votes. So I just did a thing, sort of had a joke to people on the night when they came in, a group were watching the TV, and they said, "Oh my God, it's a national government." And there's Winston smiling away there, and I thought, "Hold my beer," says Winston.
Yeah. Well, I was sitting with Winston after he came back from delivering his speech to the faithful in Russell. And I was sitting there watching him, and there was a few glum people around, and he had this big beaming smile on his face, and he was sitting there and said, Luxon and Seymour are going to have to get the calculators out shortly. And I said, "Oh, what do you mean?" He said, "Well, you just watch. He's just made his speech. He said he's got victory. His numbers are looking like about 40, just a bit shy of 41%. Mm-hmm. Said by the end of tonight, they'll be in the 38s. You watch." And sure enough, and that's the benefit of experience and longevity, to know how it goes. And
well, so he did on his little ad when he got on his horse.
Yeah.
He said, "Not my first rodeo," right?
That's right.
His first rodeo, but not Winston's.
No. That's right. And, I actually teased him a bit that night. I said to him, Winston's a bit disappointed with that ad. And he put on his little grumpy voice and he said, "Well, I thought it was good." And I said, "Yeah, but, mate, I was expecting you to, be like Zorro at the end and sort of draw a sword and rear the horse up on its back legs." And he said, "Oh, you're never satisfied, are you, Cam?" I said, "No, mate, I'm not." But that would have been fantastic if you'd done that.
And he would have killed himself.
Yeah, exactly.
I think just getting on the horse said it all, And I thought that's got to be the best political ad of this campaign, but maybe it's up there amongst the top. So I thought, that's that message of experience.
Yeah, and the funny thing was, on all of the TV news thing when they were talking about Winston Peters, in the background behind the presenters was always the horse ad playing, every time. It was an inspired choice, and he says it was his choice too. He chose to do that.
Well, the lead always has the credit, right? So so we'll accept that. But look, it's a great ad, and it's outstanding. There's not many ads that I'm impressed by, but that was impressive. So kudos to him. Look, as we know, right? This is the guy, right? What? That he came back, the media, God love them, but some of them just don't know anything. They're just giving him a hard time. And I'm just watching him. And so he's done something that, when he came back last time, right? And for those of the viewers, the class act, and I'm not a New Zealand First supporter, right? But I understand class when I see it. When he got tossed out the Parliament, out for 3 years, came back against all the odds. We rode off because we're used to the convention. People out, he's gone. Comes back in, first speech in the House. Before I was rudely interrupted, he says, and carried on right? And what can you say now? This is like the second time he's come back from nowhere. Who does that?
Well, a guy who knows politics, intimately. And, everyone's been talking. Imagine how David Seymour feels right now, right? The entire campaign he has run has been slagging off Winston Peters, saying he doesn't trust him, saying that he won't work with him, saying that he won't do this and won't do that, and actually issuing veiled threats to the National Party that if he doesn't get his way, he's going to throw a paddy and stomp his feet and, do whatever. He must feel very, very small right now and thinking back on all those things that he said about Winston Peters, because I'll tell you right now, when those special votes come in, National and ACT are going to have to call Winston Peters to form a government.
Oh, there's no question. It's just a question of how many, right? I mean, if we National is so close to losing the seat now anyway. So
0.2%. If the vote changes by 0.2% negatively for them, they lose a seat.
Right, and I knew they were right on the edge, so that's absolutely right. So, and they could lose 2, right? But let's just even 1.
Yeah.
If ironically, as you would know, right, is that Kelvin Davis' seat in the north. Te Taitokara, is that's also very, very on special votes if you compare it to the last election, right? It's a whisker.
Yeah.
And ironically, if the Māori Party picks up that seat, it's better for the left, right? Because Kelvin gets back into Parliament, who's on the list, and of course it's an overhang for the Māori Party to keep the overhang. So, it's a double whammy. So you've got to sort of think that if the National Party loses 1 seat, they're in trouble. 2 seats, it's over. Ring, ring. Winston, always respected you, mate. Always respected you, David who? David Seymour? No, don't know who he is, So,
I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? There was a rumor going around that National was considering offering the Speaker's position to Winston Peters. And as soon as I heard that, I thought, well, they must have rocks in their heads.
They've never understood Winston. They've never.
I would imagine there was a few frantic phone calls between the backroom operators saying, pull your head in, guys. This isn't going to work.
And
he's got far too much experience and other things. But if you look at the campaigns of all the campaigns, let's start with the positive, right? For my objective view or unobjective view, biased view, I think there was 2 campaigns that did really, really well.
Okay.
And 1 pretend campaign that they think they did well, but they don't realise that it wasn't them. So the 2 that I think that did really, really well were New Zealand First, obviously, for coming back.
Absolutely.
And the Maori Party, or Te Pāti Maori, for actually understanding their constituency and who their actual voters were.
Absolutely.
And going and ripping those seats off the Labour Party, who were adamant they were going to retain them. Now, I think they might pick up 2 more. I think they might pick up Te Taitokara, but they might even pick up another one. And if they get 2, then that phone call is definitely going to Winston Peters. But those are the 2 campaigns that I think were brilliant for them.
Look, okay, let me talk about the Māori Party campaign because I had some knowledge of it. It's transformative for them, right?
Yeah.
They had changed because when they formed the Māori Party, when it was formed, right, it was formed by generation, which is different from who they are now.
Yeah.
Conservative, cautious, and it wasn't about core issues of class, of the poor, the working, the people from Struggle Street. It was the idea of Māori sovereignty and Māori support. And by going with National, right, that's not their base. So therefore, it was always, and as you would know, right, from a strategic point of view, electorally, it was a very clever move by Key because it adds votes. It's not competing for each other's votes. So you get it in.
Yeah.
With when they, and then of course they all got tossed out because that was going to have happen because even this time round, the party vote in all the Māori seats went to Labour.
Yep.
But the Māori Party for the first time very close, and that's the first. And the only reason they didn't win the other 2 seats sort of in the north because the Green Party ran electorate candidates in those 2 seats. They didn't run at the other. So they split the vote and allowed. But you're quite right. On the specials, they could get both seats. They could get as close in Tamaki Makaurau in Auckland and very, very close as Ravensden and North. So that's, and of course, the irony of that would be they won 6 seats, and the only seat they didn't win was a seat that a Labour Party MP, Neka Waidiri, had jumped ship and went to the Māori Party and then lost the seat to a young Māori woman. And I thought, well, does that send a message or what? Look, it's just outstanding. And I think that the Māori Party, and as you know, that John Tamahiri, being the president, very strategic. What say about John? He understands messaging, and he got them to really focus on the core issues: cost of living, housing, the wealth tax, etc., which Labor ran away from, which is interesting. And we know what that happened. So I agree with it. And the Māori Party is home and it's base now, right? They will pick up all 7 seats, in my view, the next election. If they don't win, they'll win. They're like the best, they're going to land up with 6. But if they get the 6, even 5, they'll pick up the rest of the seats, and they're permanent. It's a permanent political force. And New Zealand first, well, what can you say? It's Lazarus from the dead. And, I've taken the view that Winston's been dead for 10 years, but it doesn't matter, They still they vote for Winston no matter what. I'm joking. But the Greens is, I think you're alluding to, right?
Yeah.
They've come of age in the sense of, this is my take on it, right, that Labor lost the urban Liberal, which is it's trauma for Labor, right, because that's who runs their party. It's the Liberal left.
That's right.
And they've lost their core seats. So before you see it, just Chloe, that was an accident, a bit like when Sandra Lee won Auckland Central for the Lions, it's an aberration. They'll come back. So in Chloe, hold on, second time round, and got it. And Greens ran really well in Mount Albert. It may well have tipped the Labor candidate out. They will, Helen White. But Rongotai, I thought they had I thought the Greens would win Wellington Central, but Rongotai, really? So that's permanent. I think, and you may not agree, and your viewers may not, but I think this is good for the Green Party in the obvious thing, but I think it changes the nature of the Green Party. Those 3 MPs are interested in keeping their seats.
How long is James Shaw going to stay as leader, though, now?
Oh, it doesn't matter. Because, I think James has been good for them, I do.
Well, he's the sane voice of the Green Party.
Yeah, no. Well, I'll reinforce this. The fact is they've got 3 seats, general seats, because you're disciplined on not being crazy, because you lose your seats. See, that's what I meant, is that the days of the hippies being able to kind of call, I don't mean to disrespect, I'm being dismissive, but, the ill discipline, I think, is going to go, because you've got 3 MPs there going, no, we're not doing that. I think that's going to change the power relationships within the Greens. So I think, the minor parties, or the third power parties, I should say, not the minor, all of them had a great night at the expense of Labor.
Yeah. Labor had a dreadful campaign. It was entirely negative, despite Chris Hipkins trying to tell us it wasn't. Talk about gaslighting the audience in the last debate, telling everybody that we've been having a positive campaign. It was rubbish. They had nothing positive to say because they've got nothing positive that they can hang their hat on. None of their flagship policies and announcements from 2017 came even remotely close to being delivered. They're huge. And then they had massive announcements on extra things like another harbour crossing with Michael Wood and, that we're going to do this by this date and that by that. Nothing ever happened. And so they had nothing left other than to actually channel the nasty party. And, negative campaigns don't work in New Zealand. I think the only negative campaign that has worked was in 1975 with Rob Muldoon with the Dancing Cossacks.
And that ad ran once.
Yeah, it ran once. Everybody talked about it. It was highly negative, incredibly negative.
Yes,
but it also made you laugh at the same time because it was a cartoon.
For those who don't know who aren't our age, it was that they're turning the country red, and now come the Cossacks, because in those days that communism was a thing.
Yeah, well, it was a thing, not so much.
Of the past. So I think obviously with Labour, what he'd say. When you talk about the negative ads, right, here's a thing I just about wept when I saw it, right? I was out in South Auckland at one point, and on the wall was a poster of Christopher Luxon, and like the Trump sort of gangster with the black and white, the posters they around. I thought it was a national ad, and I'm thinking, gee, that's very trendy. Christopher Luxon in a big photo, and there's some words, but who reads words when it's a big poster, right? And I had to go up there, and then I realised no, and then I thought. It didn't say it was a Labour ad, and I was just confused. I sort of said it had, putting don't put them at risk in that. And of course, I made a joke because it had something about, too risk for New Zealand. I can't even remember what the words were, right? So I took a photo, sent it to the Labour team, and I said, if I was mischievous, if I was a Nat and mischievous, I'd graffiti above those words and put Labour is too risky for New Zealand and run it as a Luxon ad. And then make a joke of him. Now, they didn't appreciate the joke, but I said, where in part of Marketing 101, you promote your opponent when you've got limited funds.
You never do it.
And then I drove down the St. Luke's by the St. Luke's, and they had a big electronic board, and I saw Luxon again with, Luxon's name, and I knew then it wasn't one of their ads. But, of course, you've got all these words at the bottom, and I'm thinking, this is cars driving by. No one's going to see those words, so they're going to think it's a national ad. I was just astonished.
Well, it's like the ACT Party ones attacking Winston as well. They had a picture of Winston Peters smiling, and they had some words that you could believe that Winston Peters would say. And, it was just bizarre that both the ACT Party and the Labour Party were both attacking New Zealand first.
And, yeah, you're right, because New Zealanders are polite.
Yeah. I mean, if you take my experience with New Zealanders in 2014, and what happened then, you were right in the middle of the beast that was busily slaying me at the time. But, politics is politics. But there was news articles saying I was New Zealand's most hated man. And, after the 2014 election, I can only remember one person who ever said anything to me to my face that was negative. And he was in a car and he wound down the window. And as I walked towards him, he drove off, giving me the fingers and shouting at me. But it was only one person. So if I was New Zealand's most hated man, and I didn't experience anybody giving me abuse or anything like that, then, you're right. New Zealanders are polite. They won't be rude to people to their face, but they won't vote for you.
Well, my experience is that people in New Zealand are very polite. I think that's our English DNA, but I think it's a Polynesian thing too. So New Zealanders in politics have always been almost always are very polite, to your face at least.
Yeah, to your face. They might do things on Twitter or Facebook or stuff like that, but when you meet them face to face, they very rarely cut loose on you. And that's what I've experienced.
Yeah, well, New Zealanders are very passive-aggressive in politics. I think that's right.
Yeah, and this is where we see the media are kind of out of sync with the New Zealand public, and it's been shown too, in the lead up to the election, the media were trying to make a race of this at the last minute, in the last week, that things were very close and it didn't turn out that way. And then, of course, we saw that manifest itself with Damien O'Connor leaving the caucus room and Jenna Lynch getting in his face and he told her to F off. And, the media ran that in headlines, almost immediately so that we could feel sorry for them. But everybody that I was talking to thought that Damien O'Connor was very restrained.
Look, I agree. I think the media. Well, we deal in the media world, and they need to be fed each day. We always say feed the chooks, and they get bored very easily. So in the last week, if it's Labor's going to lose by landslide, possibly in the headlight. So, the only question I've got to Hipkins and his team is, so how much do you think you're going to lose by, and how much is all your fault and all the things you've done wrong? But they get bored with that, right? So in the last week, they've got to change the narrative. And Labor, of course, has to do the spin, right? We're closing the gap. They don't say, oh, yeah, we're going to get a real hiding. That's their job. So they're going to be saying to the press, spinning to the press, our signs are, we're coming back and, we've got a late run and that, because that's what they've got to do. Then the media, because, they have no analysis, a lot of them, they go straight and they just buy it hook, line and sinker. So it builds up the momentum in the last week. So Labor had a job to do, and they did it. The media had a job to do, and they didn't. So therefore it comes as a great shock to everyone on Saturday night, but not to people like you and me. Because the rule of thumb in politics, 101, learn to count.
Yeah, learn to count and use all your fingers and your toes if you need to.
Yeah, and if you're looking at the polls, they were telling all the polls up to in the last week, all told you what the result was going to be.
Yeah, I mean, it was funny because they, Labor released the Talbot Mills poll and said, the surge is on, and that showed them at about 29-30%, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, the Guardian poll was the best they ever had, which was 30. So my view to them when I was talking to some of them on the Monday, you just see that poll, ignore the rest, and so, we're close, there's only 4 points between us, and they've got a job to do, and they went and did it.
Yeah, they went and did it.
But their own polling at 28%, said that, and that's what they got.
Yep, that's right. And that's the thing with polls. I think people make the mistake of looking at polls individually and not looking at the trend and where the trend was going. And if there's amazing things out there, like I don't know, Wikipedia, where you look at go and look at Wikipedia polling for the 2023 election, and you have a look at the charts that are on that page, and it's obvious that there was going to be a change of government. National was kind of flatlining, but not going down. Labor was on an inexorable slide, and all the minor parties were on the rise. There was going to be a change, and there was nothing that was going to change that.
Well, I think that was clear. I think if anyone who was spinning the fact is that Labor had a chance, they're partisan, right? They're spinning. But I find that Wikipedia is actually the best for any polls in any country, because what they do is they compare the same poll with the same poll. What the short-term media attention span, you compare the last poll, which was taken, with the last poll before that. But they're different polling companies with different
methodologies,
different technology. And so you can only look at polls as comparing the same pollsters with their previous polls. And all of them showed the rise, that National was flatlining and the votes were going to the other parties. And once New Zealand First was seen to be a 5% player, then suddenly they were getting votes from all over the place. So, and I did a bit of a survey on Friday night, and not that I'm you and I are genius, just we know, but I got all the numbers right. But that's just because I looked at the polls.
And that's the thing, isn't it? Because if you look at some of these very minor parties, particularly in the freedom movement, it didn't seem that there was anybody there that was dealing with reality. And, I was copping flack on this station by saying that what they were living on was what I call hopium. It's very, very addictive, but ultimately destructive, because it tricks you into believing something that is never going to occur if you are rational and as cold and calculating as you and I are when it comes to looking at the numbers. And it's the numbers that matter. And there was no way that people like Liz Gunn, who was variously claiming that they could win if they got every vote in Southland, or they could get 2 million votes. It was just fanciful stuff that people clung to without even questioning the leadership of those parties to say, well, hang on a second. And I did this to Matt King. I said to him, Matt, you say you're going to win in Northland. Have you done a poll there to show you're winning? He said, no, I'm just going by the gut feel. And it comes back to that politeness thing. Nobody was prepared to tell Matt King that he was dreaming. Maybe they needed a Daryl Kerrigan to pop up in Northland to tell the truth. But in the end, we had to run a poll right, to show that he had come fourth. And guess where he came on election night? Exactly where our poll at RCR said he would, fourth.
Well, it's delusion and also, I think, narcissism at that level. It just is. And what they do, I always tell people when they candidate, everyone who comes up to you and shake your hand and wish you luck, that's not a vote.
No.
That's just being polite. When people say good luck, that means, go well. It doesn't mean I'm voting for you. And I said, what you got to do is when you're in a crowd, look at the people, how many people are around the walls and not engaging, right? Because what they do is they get a thing is people come up and they talk to a few people and they think the whole group is supporting them, right? Because they want to believe it, right? It's not that they're being misled. They want to be misled because it is just political sort of narcissism. I mean, Liz Gunn, she had great science, and I didn't know anything about her apart from she was a TV reporter once. And I didn't need to know anything more, right? There's someone who just gets this vision in their head that they're amazing. And journalists, of course, are the worst, or a lot of them, because they've been on TV and so they think, they're famous. But all of that lot, and Brian and Tamaki, right? They go to church and they got their followers, their worshippers, say, oh, you're wonderful, you're Jesus, the rep on this world. So, they just believe it because they want to believe it. They go into politics, so it comes as a rude shock to them. But no one else.
I said to Brian Tamaki a couple of months ago, God loves a trier, and he just grinned at me. And I said to him, look, Brian, I'm going to tell you the facts that nobody else is going to tell you. You've got 100,000 members of your church nationwide, and you can't even get 10% of them to vote for you.
Well, that hits them hard, right? Because they just assume all those people are going to vote, and that's how they make their decisions, right? So we've got 100,000, that's 5%, and then they've got friends and, and so on and so on, and they just think, see, we're on a roll.
Yeah.
But, if you spend your time in church on a Sunday and you're building a political movement, you'll want to believe it. So it is what it is.
I have a real problem with people in that are leadership in churches being involved in politics, because I know what it takes to be involved in politics, and I think that's incongruent with your beliefs as a Christ follower. To be a politician, which necessitates lying and double dealing and all of the things that go on inside politics. They're the sort of things that you speak against on a Sunday or a Saturday. And so I find it incongruent that they want to stand for Parliament. I just can't see how you can rationalise those two things together.
Well, it's not a big thing in this country, right? Because we are a sect. And we don't buy it. Different Christian parties, there is evangelical, it's that community which kind of gets it. They think they've been touched by God to lead the unsaved. So they just get this in their head, and they look at, say, in the States where the churches are cultural, deep cultural ties, and it's not that way in the rest of the West. And so in New Zealand, we've never bought into this, God stuff in politics. Like to think that in the States, of course, you've all got to pretend as that you're Christians to even get elected to dog catcher. In this country, you had John Key, you had Helen Clark, you had, a whole swag. No prime minister wears their religion. And Chris Luxon, of course, does the opposite. He plays it down because he knows it's just not a key thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I find difficult with Chris Luxon, because myself, I'm a Christian. I wear it on my sleeve, and it doesn't matter to me that people will point their finger and say, oh, well, you're this and you're that. I don't care, right? I've got my faith, and that's fine. And other people don't have faith, and that's fine too. But when somebody says they've got faith and then when they're questioned on it, runs the other way, I really start scratching my head and thinking, I don't think you're the man for me.
Are you ashamed of, which one are you ashamed? Ashamed of being a Christian or ashamed of being in politics,
Exactly.
Look, I agree with you on that, Bill English is very good on it. He said, my faith is my faith. That's in my life. It guides some of the my values. But, they take a secular approach to doing their job. I think Luxton sort of ducking and diving shows something kind of.
He looks sneaky and evasive when he does it.
Well, that's because he's been sneaky and evasive,
Well, on that we agree.
Yeah.
I want to throw a curveball at you, Matt.
Sure.
I was looking at David Farrer's article on the demographics of the current parliament as it stands. And he says 25% of the MPs are Maori. And then I look at the Maori electorates and the vote that goes on there. And there's a very big disconnect between the Maori electorates and the vote that happens there in the general public, where generally Maori are considered to be around 15% of the population. Yet we've got this anachronism from the past that was only ever supposed to be temporary. When you mentioned that you thought this was baked in now, that it was permanent, and we've got a gerrymander or Maori-mander of these seats that are sitting there and if you look at the party vote and the number of seats they're going to get, they're actually going to become overrepresented. And then if you look at the statistics of everybody's ethnicity, and this is the terrible thing about ethnicities, once you start cutting into it and peeling back that onion, you start revealing that actually now Pākehā are going to be underrepresented in Parliament. And I know you'd probably say, well, that's a good thing because, it redresses 150 years of whatever, right? But if you're going to live by the sword, you need to die by the sword as well. And if you're going to start talking about ethnicity and percentages and things like that, then you have to do it for all ethnicities. And then we start seeing that we've got a real problem. And I wonder if that is a debate that the National Party are brave enough to have. I know Winston will have it, and I know ACT will have that debate. But is National brave enough to have that debate that, hang on, under MMP, we've had 25% of the MPs elected are of Maori extraction of some point? And but then again, how do you count someone as Maori when actually they're probably European as well?
Well, that's right.
And then that gets us back to is it one person, one vote that we really should be following for democracy, or do we have to keep doing this Maori-mander to, supposedly give them a hand up?
Yeah, well, it's a curveball, but I can catch it.
Sure, I knew you would be able to.
Well, because it's important. That's a debate. A grown-up debate, and I think we as a society are mature enough to have those debates, right? It's not a question of that Māori getting too much or too less, right?
Yeah.
So I think the debate is two separate things, right? You have kaupapa Māori, those who embrace their Māori approach, like I say, Willie Jackson, and a Kelvin Davis, etc., and certainly the Māori Party, and then you got those like a Simon Bridges, and I just pull his name because he's no longer an MP, who have Māori ancestry but don't identify that as an important part of their life.
So David Seymour as well.
Exactly. So they get, and Winston, of course, who everyone all thought was Italian, until we got past his teeth. I'm joking. When you say everyone's Māori, as a quota, well, it's what you identify and what you think is important. I think that's the debate, is whether someone's an accident of birth as kind of, irrelevant in my view. So, but I think the quota thing is always wrong. Like in the Labour Party is saying, do you put a quota on how many people are gay? And then you go, how many people should have a business background? How many people, new migrants, which communities, and Chinese, but what sort of Chinese? The Indian, you say, but he's Fijian Indian and he's mainland Indian. And it's just to the point of absurdity. And this is where the left, and I use that as in a broad term, but the ideological left have taken identity politics to a ridiculous position. Right.
The Greens are a case in point. They've got a constitutional requirement to have a male and a female leader.
Yeah, and that's quite common now.
Sure, but with modern identity politics, what is a woman? I mean, you could actually have a man as a co-leader, but identify as a woman.
Debate before we get into the absurdity of that. But I think the principle of having a representative parliament with voices that is a better mix, and I think that's right. So having people who are new migrants or voices like that, and about people who are Māori and Pākehā, of course, is their two main sort of brands, of this country culture. And Pacifica people say, look, it's a good thing. You wouldn't want a parliament of all brown women. You say, because you wouldn't feel that was a representative society. Sure. So I think there are more guidelines. I think when you start to put the rules, and then the list can become a math exercise.
Yeah.
Oh, well, if you're a gay brown woman from Invercargill, it won't be there because you actually bring anything. It's that, we need that to make our quota. And that goes on, unfortunately. You know? And that's where it becomes a tyranny. Identity becomes tyranny. And you don't actually think, well, what is the mix of people we want? And it doesn't mean it's equal. It means equitable. You say, we want those voices. So there's that. And I think that's a growing, and parties have got to have that. Because at one stage, as you would know, and many of you listeners won't know, is that there was a time where the leader or co-leader or deputy leader of every political party had Māori.
Yeah.
And you know what was done. It was done so that, this is after National done its relationship with the Māori party, right? Everyone got this is so important. And it was doing it for that, not for political reasons or strategic reasons. They were doing it because, we don't want to look racist, And I think that's absurd, of course. So that's just us growing up, right? Now, your challenge is about the Māori seats. They were first put up, when they were put up because of the property. That Māori had communal property, not individual property. And therefore it was seen as, and of course, there was quite a gap between Māori being quite, marginalised, ghettoised, to use an American term, but, they were not part of the mainstream in New Zealand at that time. So that was as we need voices in there. They won't get elected in the general seat, so that would, and the property was a requirement. So it was supposed to be as temporary, you're quite right, and now it's been cemented in. Now you can have that debate. No party, I know they've tried it and it all just turns into a mess, to try and get rid of them. They're part of the culture of this country now, and I think that's going to be good for the Māori Party. It's always been good for Labour. They've always had that up their back. In their back pocket, 5 or 6 or 7 seats or 7 seats now, and now locked in. So that is going to be hard to change that. I don't think you can have a debate, but I think the agreement that's too much part of it now. So I think that's different, right? So you've got half of Māori in New Zealand enroll in the Māori seat and half in the general seat.
Yeah,
I was one of those ones who swapped over, and it's partly because I think having the Māori Party voice isn't a bad thing. It's staunch, it takes the line, and it challenges the status quo. But also, those seats fit between Labour and the Māori Party, and so your vote's worth something. When you're in a safe Labour seat or a safe National seat, you think, well, my electorate vote ain't going to matter here. It will matter in the Māori seat, and that's also advantage the Māori Party sort of over the last decade as more and more Māori, particularly the younger generations, are moving to their Māori seats, and that's affected the outcome of those seats. The youth, articulate youth, the kids who have been educated and becoming very comfortable in their Māoriness are now actively engaged in the Māori seats, whereas before it was a very conservative election. But look, I think the debate has merit. I just think you're pushing it uphill, mate.
Well, that it's a debate that's worth having, and I think we need to be growing up about it, because what annoys me the most is that if you do try and start a debate or have a debate, the very first thing that is uttered from those who oppose that debate is that you're racist, just because you want to have a debate.
Well, that's right. And if you, as a male, if you have a debate about woman, you're a sexist, and if you have a debate about trans policy, you're a homophobe. Yeah, and thus it goes on, because that's the trick. That's the trick to close the debate down. as a woman, or I used to watch it in the C70s. As a Māori, I feel, so the white people here don't feel emboldened to say, well, actually, I think you're talking crap. So we discipline ourselves. So we stop that debate, and I think that's wrong. I think the debate about Māori, see, in the old days of the general seats, you would never. It was very you couldn't put your hand on heart and say that Māori could win in general seats if they identified as Māori. So the people who got elected into general seats were anglicised. They're very, like Winston Peters, Ben Couch, Sandra Lee. They were acceptable Māori. Now, if a Hone Harawira said, I'm going to run in Northland, that's never going to happen. So they say the voices which are strong pro-Māori won't ever win a general seat. So they've all get on the list now. But you see, and that's why I think the rise of the Māori Party sort of in the Māori seats brought some people with quite strong opinions or challenging opinions to mainstream New Zealand, and that's probably a good thing. But let's do that now anyway. So I'm kind of reinforcing your argument. If you can get different voices on the list, then, what's your argument for the Māori seats?
Well, that's right. And I still think that it's a debate that's worth having.
I'm with you on that. I'm like you. I'm reinforcing your strong view at the beginning of this discussion is that you look at reality. So those people who think they're going to win go, good on you, and they get their 1%, and they go, how does it happen? I'm saying to you, great debate, good luck, ain't going to change. So, but, it's not going to change in the near future. Let's put it like that.
Yeah. So let's talk about what happens next. We've got a result. We've got the special votes to come, and that's harder to pick than a broken nose for how that's going to go. We can only really look at history to give us an indication of how that goes. And I think you'd agree with me that National is likely to lose at least one seat in the specials. They've traditionally done that. And then there's the question over the two Maori Party or the Maori electorates that are very, very close on where those go. Okay. But let's just assume, let's say the Maori Party picks up another one and National loses one. Then the 61, well, that won't be 61, that'll be 60. And we're probably looking at a parliament of 122, maybe 123. It seems to me that National and ACT is going to have to talk to Winston Peters seriously.
Yeah, look, I think we should assume that. Right? We assume that New Zealand First are going to have to be in the mix. However, as you know, right, what National's got to cross its fingers, and certainly David Seymour has got to hope like hell, it's that if the Māori Party does well in the special votes, in the Māori electorates, which I assume they will, and just for your listeners, it's more because that many Māori are in rental accommodation and they move around, so it's more special votes. Yeah. And that's why. And plus, of course, the booths sometimes are very hard to get to in particularly rural areas because they've got to go spread all over the show. And so what they tend to, a lot of them also will register for sort of on the day, or in the week before, more people than in general seats. So that's why they tend to tip more. And because the Māori Party on the rise, and the Public and Labour on their way down, that they will probably tip even more. So they're 2.6% at the moment, the national poll. I'm actually picking, you see, why I'm doing this is that I think that they'll go over 3% on the party vote, which will give them 4 seats.
Yeah.
So even if they won Kelvin seats, because it's a 0.2% swing, and I'll pick that up. If they picked up Kelvin's seat and got over 3%, the overhang is still 1. It doesn't go to 2. So I don't think it's likely that if they get Kelvin's seat, this vote's going to go up as well, because that makes sense. Yeah. So I don't think the overhang will increase. And if it's the other way around, it won't be an overhang. Now, National will leave at 1 seat, so I accept that. And probably 2, but let's just go with 1. So that makes it even. And I don't, and they'll get the Waikato, the Point Waikato seat in due course, and that will give it an extra seat for them. So that's their best hope, is they only lose one seat and then they can get Point Waikato and then they'll survive. So that's their best, but I don't think that's going to happen. So they're going to be one down. And if the Greens, well, you know what happens. And so it's a New Zealand First national act, not necessarily a government, but, the bloc.
Yeah.
And Winston, as you know, will extract great wealth for his support.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, we've heard reports that, and I know this is true, that it happened, that it was floated through back channels that National was thinking of offering Winston Peters the role of Speaker. And it was very quickly a message was sent back, don't even think about it. And I can't even believe that they did that. I mean, I know they did do it. But
seriously? Do you think this is just wannabes in National, like the mid-level sort of fancy? Anyone who knows Winston, right? Well,
that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, the National Party has spent 30 years undermining, white-anting, demonising, criticising, attacking Winston Peters. The only saving grace in this set of negotiations is that none of the people who did that are there in the party now. And I would think that if Christopher Luxon had half a brain, and you'd like to think that he does, but there's scant evidence of this, you would like to think he would quietly tell John Key, Bill English, and a few others to shut up and let it be with us, because if they get themselves involved in the negotiations, well, it says two things. It says that Luxon isn't capable of doing it himself, and B, they don't really respect Winston Peters by having the very people who have white-handed and undermined him for so many years involved.
Well, Winston, his pride and his respect are very important, and they've always not understood that. And he was with National, right? He's like, don't you understand what motivates Winston, right? And he's an old Muldoonist, sort of the old conservative, mainstream, decent, the Rob's Mob thing, that's New Zealand First base, right?
Yeah.
These hard-working people, people should get in and nothing, struggle street people, who do the honest day's work. Yeah, that's his community, right? People shouldn't get a privilege and they shouldn't, And so when the Nats disrespect him, and you just think, what are you doing? But anyway, good luck to them. But you're right. If Luxton allows the old Nat to no longer there, that sends a message. I'm not my own guy. I don't know what I'm doing. And also, it will make sure that Winston is going to punish him for it. And I'm surprised. He may well be doing it, but and I know, right? The smart thing he would have done is got on the phone to Winston now. Now, say, look, let's see how the results are. But look, I want to build a good relationship regardless. It's about, and Winston deserves that respect, right? He came back once more, and by having that, so you don't have to say, look, if we don't get the numbers, we're going to need your support. It's obvious, but you don't have to promise anything at this time. It's about a relationship, and the relationship's got to go for 3 years. So this talk about Winston will give him, a bauble and a trinket. By giving them a badge as a speaker. That's an insult. And they'll have to be spending their time of saying how they don't want to give them the Deputy Prime Minister, because Winston's not there to get the ministry of, funny walks. I mean, he's there for real portfolios.
No, and that's the thing. I think that what Winston Peters will do is that he'll insist on the COVID inquiry, because he sees that as a way that over a period of a year he can deliver death by 1,000 cuts and generational pain for the Labour Party, because they were the ministers who were all responsible for all of that. And he can if anyone can make the case and sheet home the blame for the excesses of COVID, it'll be Winston Peters, and I think he'll insist on that. The other things that I think that he, sorry.
That gives them a platform.
Yeah.
Knows where the bodies will be buried. But again, you see, that was about respect. That Labor disrespected him,
Yeah.
It's like the Shipley. Once they disrespect him, he is a man you do not want to feel his eye over personal insults. And the way that he was then banned from Parliament by Mallard, these things all add up. And I'm just thinking, you will reap great pain for that. And that's good politics for him too, right? I mean, he's 1,000 cuts. And he will there, and he'll just go, and that will be his new base, or increase his base. So it's good politics, but it helps that he settles a few scores too.
That's right. And then I think that the portfolios that he'll ask for will be things that are to do with infrastructure, like energy, for example, and perhaps some associate transport type things to fix the roads up north and various other places that need fixing. And there'll be things that will have demonstrable benefits at the end of 3 years that he can point to and say, well, we did that. We wanted those portfolios so we could fix that. And I'm pretty sure he's not going to want to have anything to do with being anywhere near the money side of politics.
Well, I think you're right about things like roads, tangible things like fix the holes in the road stuff, not the bridge and trains to the airport and things which are in the never world, right? He's like, 3 years, this is what I do. And so he's an old style politico. You deliver to your people in 3 year cycles. In terms of the money, I'll defer to you on that. He under the Bolger government, of course, he was treasurer and made Bill Birch do all the work. So he might not want to give Nicola a free rein on finances, because he's going to wear that. So he'll get himself sort of in there somewhere. So I don't know if he can get away with the finance, but he might put Shane in as associate type finance with David Seymour to keep an eye on them. But, that makes more sense.
But I think where this is going to land, and I think you'd agree with me on this, there is a change of government. There's no way that the left bloc can get up there. They're never going to peel off Winston Peters from that.
That's a given.
But I think also, I actually think that ACT is going to end up marginalised.
Winston's going to make sure of it.
Yeah, because I don't think David Seymour or the chief of staff, what's his name, Andrew Keatles, who of course lives with Jenna Lynch. I don't think Winston wants to have them anywhere near important stuff, because it'll just end up on News Hub one night. Yeah. And he's very, very aware of those sort of things. And so I think that ACT will be I think that they're ill-equipped to conduct negotiations against somebody like Winston Peters.
Well, maybe. That Winston's wily, not as rodeo. But his thing will be, his maximum position will be, I'll form a government with National and ACT support on supplying confidence. We'll give him some under minister job, associate minister job, right? Now, ACT's not going to wear that, and he's not going to get that, right? So, he won't be able to get away with that. But his brand, as you know, has been saying to New Zealand, I'm the one who stops the extremists. And so he'll be in Luxton's ear saying, do not let that do this. We're not going to wear this. Will not be acceptable, to mainstream Kiwis, the whole bit. And ACT is going to get muted because they'll be wanting things. If they think their foreign investment and control stuff is going to happen now, it's over. They could have got it under a national ACT government. That's over. Winston goes, not a chance. And he can look. And you talk about, if you want to talk about mischief, right? Point Waikato, Winston could say, if you're going to do that, I'm going to run there. And then the opposition party, this is all fantasy stuff, right? Of course, the real word doesn't work like that. Imagine all the opposition parties, if they saw the advantage there, they'll just all pull out and leave a fight between Winston and National and say, good luck. And Winston say, I want a mandate to stop the extremes of ACT, and stop the foreigners from coming in here and buying our here. Yeah, what do you do?
If I was National, what I'd be doing right now is sitting there and getting David Seymour around the table and saying, right, guys, we're going to actually pull out of Port Waikato. Andrew Bailey's already on the list. He's in Parliament. We're going to gift that seat to New Zealand First, just like we did with Epsom. And that gives New Zealand First a bulwark against being voted out of Parliament at the next election. And it's a gesture of incredible goodwill to say that we are effectively, it's laying down the Wero, isn't it? Saying, here's a gift for you. And if New Zealand First picks that gift up and takes that, then they're locked into the government.
Oh, look, when I was Chief of Staff for the Labor Party, right, I tried to convince the Labor Party not to run against them in the by-election and for the general election in the seat. I said that it locks them in, as a friend for good. Wouldn't do it. I said, look, I'm just telling you, you've got to think like MMP. And, and the same with the Greens, you see, they'd given them a seat at some point at the time, then you get to protect your other seats. But by not doing that, see, now they've got 3 seats.
That's right.
You've got to lock them in, and Winston then knows he's safe, but also he knows he can keep a seat, but he's got to be nice to you, right? And that's how you build a relationship. So you're absolutely right. I mean, we could do that because we're not involved in the emotion of it all, right? And the locals feeling that, all that. And so what you've got to do, you've got to handle it well. But yeah, if you sit in as we're doing now, you can sit in a room with your whiteboards up, it makes great sense. And you lock in a permanent centre-right government for a very long time. That's exactly what you do.
Mm. Well, I think we've pretty much picked the eyes out of the election campaign, and now we sit here and watch the machinations and see what comes next. But we are going to have a centre-right government. Well, I'm always loath to call the National Party right these days. They're very... I
know. I was speaking to someone last night. He's on the right of the right, and he still thinks that National's a communist party. And when I said, his was, they'll never touch the real issues, but it's, as we all know, apart from probably ACT, you can put all the parties sort of in New Zealand into the US sort of Democratic Party, right? Politics are pretty broad, and and I know that the policy difference between Labor and National so small compared to the differences between their coalition partners.
Well, that's right. And National has got a reputation as being the party of the status quo. And that's what's always concerned me about the National Party. They consider themselves to be good managers of the economy that Labor built.
Well, indeed.
Except in this case, there's a mountain. There's a mountain of debt that Grant Robertson built, and there's no hiding that. So there are going to have to be some drastic changes in New Zealand in the coming years.
Well, according to ACT, but we'll see, because Winston ain't going to buy that.
I mean, there's good debt and there's bad debt, right? And I talked about this with Morris Williamson. If you borrow to build something like, Marsden Point, Motunui, dams, that's good debt because you've got something that's intergenerational that will be there.
A debt to buy a house, that's a good debt.
Yeah, but a debt to paint a marae or hand out to the arts sector, or that's just wasteful spending.
It's such a Philistine.
I know, but I look. There's a lot of savings that I could find right now. Like I'd sell TVNZ and Radio New Zealand to the highest bidder and get whatever you can for it. Their legacy media, get rid of them. Put in place a public broadcasting act that says in times of emergency that you can take over the airwaves for a limited time. I would also stop the subsidies of private media companies by saying that all this government advertising is actually in the public interest, so you'll run it for free and we're not going to pay you for it anymore. And then that'll cut the throat of a few of these, compliant media outlets. I'm quite ruthless when I think about these things.
Yeah, well, the media, I mean, the media has changed. Right? So like this, that's the future. And so the legacy media is the new name for them, right? They're all subsidised, and some now directly, and I think that's outrageous, right? So they're actually giving subsidies to the mainstream press for them to employ people to do stuff because to them it's not market value, and it's just extraordinary these direct subsidies. to media that committees pick who gets what in their political appointments. My God, and of course the media then don't challenge that because it's their money. Well, they get the money. So yes, we might come to different conclusions. I always think there should be one public broadcaster and everything else should.
But you would, because you're a communist.
Well, as I say, when people they call me a communist, I always say, I wish. I think you're trying to flatter me.
The other thing that I'd do is look at abolishing and axing the concert program. They could give it the 5 listeners of the concert program who are still remaining.
You are a Philistine. I was joking before, but now I know you are.
Yeah, I'd give them a Spotify account and it'd be a whole lot cheaper. Just get rid of it.
Look, I think it's right. Look, I don't agree with that. But what it is media has changed. Communication has changed. Society's changed. And we're still trying to prop up things from another era. And it's public money being used to prop up things with very little value. Because if you take that proposition, you could be funding, direct funding sports. You could be directly funding all sorts, recreational things. Because who chooses which ones? So it's either all or nothing.
What really rips my undies is the funding of the Royal New Zealand Ballet and the Symphony Orchestra and the Auckland Philharmonia Orchestra. Why are we propping up 17th century ideals from Europe? Like, let's just get rid of it.
Well, I think it's in my mind to say it, but you'll know, and your listeners will know. There's the Yes Prime Minister episode on this question: is that who is the audience for these things? It's the upper middle classes. It's not for the mass of the people. This is a subsidy for the rich. And, so it's cultural and say, this is UK, European culture, ain't Kiwi culture. So, you're asking us to subsidise so the corporations can send their tickets to the clients and the people who don't need a subsidy. And I think there's some common sense with that, really. If you're going to cut, you've got to, at least it's like the Māori seats that you were saying before. You've got to have that debate in an honest and frank way.
Yeah, and that's what we need, and that's what's been missing for the last 6 years, and why people rejected this government is that debate was stifled. It was deliberate. It was calculated. And in many respects, they paid the media to stifle that debate at the same time.
I think that's a conclusion which is fair.
Yeah. And on that note, Matt, I think we'll finish this.
All right, mate. And all proud of you.
Thank you very much. I've long respected Matt McCarten's honesty and robust nature of the way he plays politics. And as you can hear, there is a mutual respect there. His assessments of the election pretty much match mine, but with a bit more nuance from the inside, from the left side, and also the Maori side of politics. It's always fun talking to Matt McCarten, and I always respect his opinions. Tell me your thoughts on what Matt had to say by emailing inbox@realitycheck.radio or text to 2057.
This is The Crunch with Cam Slater. Conversations with a side of controversy, right here on RCR.